Hey, 7th graders, it's me, Mr. Allard again. I'm live on location back at my house. I'm trying to get as many of these videos ready for you guys as we can. So today we're going to be talking about the reaction, as we talked about in class, the reaction from Parliament and King George in trying to deal with the issues that England was having after the French and Indian War, particularly having to deal with issues with debt, issues with taxes, and things like that. So we should have already in our interactive notebook, hopefully, should be our Sugar Act and stuff like this. It should be folded like we talked about in class. Your notes, wherever you want to put your notes, if you want to put your notes on the actual inside, if you want to put your notes on the flaps, that's okay. I would probably recommend putting them on the inside because there's a little bit more room there. And then on the flaps of each one is where your protest picture is going to go. We talked about that in class. It can be anything that's going to protest um, those different acts from the perspective of a colonist. All right, but here we go. So the first act to kind of come along is going to be the Sugar Act, and just as the Sugar Act talks about, is it's tax on sugar. It's going to be a 3-cent tax passed in 1764. Now, 3 cents might not seem like a lot of money back then, but this is going to be 3 cents more every time you buy sugar, and we know sugary products are a big deal in 2017. They were a big deal in 2000 or in 1764 because most products didn't come with sugar already in them. You had to put them in them yourself. So anytime you want to put sugar in your tea or sugar in your pie or make a candy or whatever, you would have to have that product in your house. So this would be a 3-cent tax on something that most colonists were using just about every day. The tax did two things. Number one, it's going to be used to try to create a revenue stream. So it's going to try to produce money. Also, it's going to be able to enforce the tax. So there's going to be some parts in it that are going to help the parliament and help the royal governors and tax collectors within the colonies actually collect the tax as well. In actuality, the sugar tax was a tax reduction. The old molasses tax, which molasses and sugar were kind of used for a variety of the same things in 1764. The molasses tax was actually 6 cents. Per pound. But the British Parliament felt if they cut the tax but were able to enforce it a little bit more, that is going to help them increase revenue. But colonists really looked at this as this was kind of the first, like, what is actually going on? We don't really understand what's going on with this tax, and kind of thinking, maybe we should kind of have had a different say on this. So the Stamp Act, all right, is passed in 1765, and historically it is widely considered to be the kind of tax that drew the most hatred from the colonists during this time period, because it was a tax on all paper products. So basically what happened is if you sold anything on paper, that the stamp would have to be on it to show that you paid the 1 penny tax on paper. Again, this was a way for the Parliament in England to gain revenue on paper products. Now, today in 2017, we might think that paper products might not be all that bad, but you got to realize that this is before computers, this is before any type of digital technology. So literally everything was created on papers. The stamp would be placed on all paper products, so newspapers, playing cards, legal documents, wedding certificates, if you were buying cards or anything like that, anything that you just run-of-the-mill paper for journals, anything that was a paper product that you were going to be using would have this 1 cent penny. And if you bought it would be on every single page. So if you bought a newspaper, that tax may be 5 or 6 cents, not just the 1 cent. And this was the one act that drew the most boycotts. This was the one act that drew the most kind of demand for repeal, and drew the most uh, kind of made the colonists the most upset, because again, this was an everyday product, something that didn't matter if you were a lawyer, didn't matter if you were a farmer. You were using paper in some way, shape, or form, and had to pay an extra amount of money on it. The Townshend Act, so quickly, due to the protests of the colonists, the Stamp Act didn't last very long. It only lasted about 2 years, um, and the Parliament repealed it because it was so unpopular. It was drawing so much unrest in the colonies. However, the Parliament and the King still felt like they should be able to tax the colonies to make revenue. So one of the things that they did is they passed the Townshend Acts in 1767. Governor Townshend is now kind of in power as Prime Minister in in the British Parliament, and this is going to be a tax on imported goods to the colonists. Now, this is goods coming from Britain. So we know still in 1767 we're operating under the mercantilism policies of England, meaning that the colonies aren't supposed to legally get goods from any other country. They're only supposed to get goods from England. So this is going to be a tax on just about everything. It's going to be a tax on tea, which is going to be a huge issue because tea would be kind of like putting a tax on any type of sugary drink today. It would be something that we consume as much as colonists were consuming tea in 1767. Paint, glass, paper products, different type of metals. Literally anything that was being manufactured in England and being sent back, as the mercantilist policy was, to the colonists would have a tax placed on it. Now, this came shortly after the Stamp Act was repealed, and it actually, some people may think, well, if the Stamp Act didn't work, how is this act going to work? And it kind of got the same fate, but Parliament went even farther to kind of put into the document that it was the right of the Parliament to be able to do this, to be able to have taxes without the consent of colonists. Our final kind of act is going to be a reaction. There's not really any taxes based on this, and depending on your perspective, is going to depend on what we call this. In the colonies, these are going to be called the intolerable acts. In England and in Great Britain, these will be called the coercive acts. Basically, coercive meaning we had to do this. Like you guys pushed us to doing this to you. The intolerable acts are going to be a response to the various type of boycotts and protests that were happening, particularly the Boston Tea Party is going to be the big reason why the intolerable acts will come down. We're going to talk about the Boston Tea Party more in depth, but just to kind of long story short, colonists dump about millions of dollars worth of tea into Boston Harbor, effectively ruining it as a response to the Tea Act, which was still around from the Townshend Acts, and England felt like it needed to sort of punish the colonies. So first thing that they do is they close the port of Boston. Boston is one of the busiest ports in the colonies at the time period, and they say we're going to shut it down until you pay back for the damages to the company. Next thing they do, Boston Tea Party happens in Boston, Massachusetts, so they take away basically any rights to self-government. They impose in Massachusetts a royal governor. They get rid of town halls. Anyone who is in the government is going to be appointed by the king and or parliament. They're going to take any officer, anyone who's a royal officer of England. So it could be a governor, could be a tax collector, could be a soldier. If they are accused of a crime, England can bring them out of the colony so they can face a fair trial in Britain. Now that's going to cause a lot of issues because lots of people think, well, that's going to give basically soldiers and all these other people rights to do kind of whatever they want. And there's going to be a new quartering act. 1764, there was a quartering act. Remember the amendment number 3, which said no troops in the homes. This is why that was part of our Bill of Rights, because it was a reaction to these quartering acts, which basically said Americans had to house British troops. From the England's perspective, that meant that, hey, they're there to protect you. So if they're there to protect you, you have to help pay for it. All right. So we got a couple questions on here. If you have any questions, make sure you're sending me a message on Schoology and we'll get to it then. See ya.